Hi, I'm Isabella He from Signal. In this video, I'm going to show you how Signal secures your GitHub deployment by ensuring zero standing privilege. With GitHub having over 100 million developers, it stores some of the most sensitive assets, intellectual property, and data from many enterprise organizations. Unauthorized access to GitHub can result in heightened vulnerability to breaches of applications and services, as well as theft of intellectual property, trade secrets, and more. Compromise of credentials with standing privileges allows bad actors to harvest additional credentials, API keys, and deploy malicious code. Take one instance in 2022 when phished employee credentials with standing privileges led to an access of more than 130 code repositories that included customized versions of third-party libraries, prototypes of internal software projects, and security files. GitHub access controls lacked any business-justified context that could have prevented access to repositories, ability to merge code, or even execute GitHub actions. Thus, there is a crucial need for eliminating standing access to GitHub to protect sensitive data. Signal provides dynamic access management as a solution to this need, powered by data from a company's range of on-prem and SaaS applications, such as incident response platforms, ticket management, or HRIS services. Let's now dive deeper into Signal's solution. Take a fictitious company called Wholesale Chips, for instance. Wholesale Chips uses GitHub Actions to continuously deploy code into AWS. If a user without proper business justification merges code into GitHub, such customer data and intellectual property may be put at a security risk. Although they've set up role-based access controls and rule sets in GitHub defining static restrictions to merging code, their current environment without Signal allows developers to merge code without considering valid runtime business justification, such as whether they're actively working on an engineering task that involves this GitHub repository. Thus, their current environment without Signal leaves them vulnerable to credential theft, privilege escalation, bad actors, and more. Wholesale Chips is a prime example of an organization that can enhance their authorization through Signal. Thus, Signal has integrated with Wholesale Chips' GitHub application to determine if the GitHub user is allowed to merge and deploy code into AWS from GitHub Actions based on dynamic business justification. With Signal, they're able to centralize all their existing policies from GitHub, as well as set up a policy that checks across Wholesale Chips' various systems of record, such as Okta and Jira, to determine if the right user is requesting access at the right time, policies that weren't possible before without Signal. With Signal, Wholesale Chips is able to secure their environment and enforce custom, short-lived access to GitHub, effectively limiting their blast radius. We'll walk through this use case in further detail in this video. Here is the Signal dashboard for Wholesale Chips, which integrates with systems of record to unify critical business context that is applied to policies to inform real-time access. From this dashboard, we have a policy configured for GitHub deployment into AWS. We have protected systems that are integrated with Signal, and systems of record that provide Signal with the business context needed to perform continuous access management. Let's delve deeper into the systems of record that are synchronizing data into Signal to support policy decisions. Similar to numerous organizations, Wholesale Chips makes extensive use of third-party SaaS applications to manage their engineering team, customer service, employee directory, and human resources. They've integrated their applications with systems of record into Signal, syncing business contacts from Jira, ServiceNow, PagerDuty, Salesforce, Okta, and Azure Active Directory. Now, with data from these systems of record, we can configure policies in Signal to further restrict access to GitHub to users with significant business justification. We want to restrict this access to ensure that only the right people can get access to merge code in GitHub at the right time. Now going into our protected systems protected by Signal, looking specifically at our GitHub use case and seeing which policies are attached to GitHub, we can see that the policy here is that GitHub authors must have an active Jira issue assigned to them for the repository they're operating in. It must be during business hours, and they also must be part of the GitHub team managing the repository. Taking a deeper look at what this Jira condition means, we can see that access to merge code in GitHub is restricted to users who have an active Jira issue assigned to them with the repository field set to the GitHub repository they're operating in, which means that they're working on a task or incident that gives them business justification to perform actions in that GitHub repository. Thus, this is a policy condition that checks whether the user can merge code in GitHub based on dynamic business context from a system of record in Wholesale Chips environment beyond GitHub itself. With this Signal policy in place, let's see how Signal helps Wholesale Chips enforce least privilege access to GitHub. As an example, we'll examine how Signal controls access to GitHub for my test user, an engineer at Wholesale Chips. Let's say that I'm now attempting to merge a pull request in GitHub. For demo purposes, we've set up a pull request here that makes some basic changes to the index file in the repository. When we try to create this pull request, we can see that the pre-check here indicates that the signal policy is failing. In GitHub Actions, we can see that our code merge would be denied by the signal policy. Thus, Signal has successfully configured GitHub to deny access for a user who did not have a business justification to perform an action in GitHub. Now let's jump over to Signal's access logs to see how our Signal policy resulted in me being denied access to GitHub. Since Signal synchronizes access management across systems of record, Signal makes auditing access easy with information from all systems of record in a centralized platform. We can filter these access logs on my individual user to examine my individual access decisions. Then we can see here that I was denied access in the logs, as we just saw when I tried to merge code in GitHub. To help organizations understand why this access decision was made, we can click on this button here, View in Policy Lens, for more information on this access decision. Policy Lens is the most straightforward way to understand why Signal returned a particular access decision. With this tool clicking in for more details, we can see here that my user was able to meet the decision and match all conditions for merging code during business hours, as well as my GitHub author being part of the GitHub team managing the repository. However, I was denied access to GitHub because I did not meet the condition for being assigned to an active Jira issue for the GitHub repository assigned. Furthermore, we can use Signal's Data Lens tool to view and understand the structure of the business context and debug my access evaluation. We'll select the entity here as the GitHub user, and then filter based on email address for my specific user. Now that we're looking at the specific user data ingested into the Signal graph, we can further narrow our search to the GitHub repository, as well as the Jira entities involved in my access decision. We can see information on the user, such as being a part of the engineering team as required by our policies, as well as the fact that our GitHub user is assigned to the matching Jira user. Expanding this, we can then see that the Jira user is connected to details such as which issues it's assigned to. Thus, we've confirmed through the Data Lens tool that the sole reason that I was denied access to GitHub was because I was not assigned to a relevant Jira issue for the GitHub repository I was attempting to merge code in. From the Policy Lens and the Data Lens tools, we've identified the exact cause for my being denied access to GitHub as my need for a matching Jira issue assigned to me. Now let's move over to Jira and assign me the issue that I need for access to GitHub. We can see in this Jira issue that the repository here is the matching GitHub repository we're attempting to merge code in, and after assigning me to this Jira issue, we expect that I now meet the criteria we defined in our Signal policy for access to GitHub. Jumping back over to GitHub over here, let's now have my user attempt to merge the pull request in GitHub again to deploy code in AWS. Going back over to the GitHub action over here that I failed previously, let's now rerun the job and see what happens. Now that we've rerun this action after having the Jira issue assigned to our user, let's come back down here and see that all of the checks have passed. Specifically, going back to the GitHub action that we failed previously, we can see that in the Signal policy check, the decision returned allowed, which reflects the fact that our Jira issue was now assigned to our user. Coming back to our pull request, let's now attempt to merge the pull request. We can see that I am now able to merge code in GitHub as I have the business justification to do so. Now that we've demonstrated how Signal provides organizations with the ability to restrict GitHub access to users with timely business justification, we've come back to the Signal access logs to take another look. As you can see, we can track my access decisions, seeing that aligned with our policy condition, I was first denied access when I was not assigned to a Jira issue, and then I was allowed access when I satisfied all policy conditions, including being assigned to an active, relevant Jira issue in the GitHub repository. As I hope that this demo has helped demonstrate, Signal is changing static role and attribute-based access control to continuous contextualized access management. With Signal's integration with GitHub, it's easy for organizations to augment their access management policies for sensitive systems such as code collaboration platforms. To learn more about Signal, visit signal.ai.